47 luxury homes couldn't flush a single toilet because I closed one valve on my ranch. 6 months later, their HOA president was wiring me $180,000 up front and agreeing to pay me $8,500 every single month for the next 25 years just to keep their neighborhood alive. All because they believed a cattle rancher would never notice what they buried beneath his land. If you're wondering how $1 million sewer project turned into the most expensive mistake an HOA ever made, stay with me, because every word of this story is true to the way property rights work, and every decision they made pushed them deeper into a hole they dug themselves. My name is Jack Morrison. I'm 52 years old, and I own 340 acres of dry cattle country just outside a luxury community called Lakeside Estates. My family has raised shorthorn cattle on this land for 3 generations. My mornings begin before sunrise, checking fences, feeding livestock, repairing pumps, and making sure every head of cattle has enough water to survive another scorching summer day. My pickup truck permanently smells like diesel fuel, leather gloves, hay, and manure. My boots have more dirt on them than most people see in a lifetime, and honestly, I prefer it that way. Ranch life teaches you that land isn't something you own on paper. It's something you protect every single day. About half a mile east of my property sits Lakeside Estates, a gated neighborhood filled with 47 luxury homes worth around $2 million each. Every house has perfectly trimmed hedges, imported palm trees, stone fountains that run 24 hours a day, and infinity pools sparkling under the Colorado sun. Even during August, when my pastures turn golden brown from drought, their lawns stay emerald green thanks to endless irrigation. They have private security, golf carts cruising quiet streets, expensive SUVs parked in oversized driveways, and an HOA board that believes money solves every problem. I was never part of that neighborhood, never joined their HOA, never wanted to. Over the years, they approached me several times asking for utility easements, landscaping access, even offers to buy small strips of my ranch along the property line. Every time my answer stayed exactly the same. No. Once you let an HOA place one permanent structure on your land, they'll eventually convince themselves they own the next 100 feet too. That lesson came from watching neighboring ranches slowly lose pieces of property through endless negotiations disguised as friendly cooperation. I wasn't interested in becoming another cautionary tale. Everything changed on an unusually hot Tuesday morning. I was riding my ATV across my south pasture to inspect a water trough after noticing lower pressure the night before. Long before I reached the pump, I saw something that immediately made my stomach tighten. Fresh dirt stretched across the pasture like an open scar carved through the middle of my grazing land. Heavy equipment tracks cut deep into the soil. Grass that had taken years to recover from previous drought seasons had been ripped apart overnight. I parked the ATV and walked closer. The trench ran farther than I could see, nearly 1,200 meters across my property, before disappearing toward Lakeside Estates. 3 sections of my barbed wire fence had been removed completely. Fence posts lay tossed aside like garbage. One of my underground water lines had been cracked clean through, slowly leaking into the dirt, while several of my cattle stood nearby, searching for water that was no longer reaching the trough. Nobody had called me. Nobody had knocked on my door. Nobody had asked permission. Standing there, I knew this wasn't some contractor making a simple mistake. Too much planning had gone into it. Survey flags marked both sides of the trench at perfect intervals. Fresh gravel had already been spread over parts of the excavation, and construction equipment tracks showed the crew had worked through most of the previous day. Someone expected this project to continue without interruption. I followed the trench toward the eastern property line, trying to understand what they had built beneath my ranch. About a quarter-mile later, I reached a cluster of survey stakes planted beside a temporary construction marker. Attached to one stake was a waterproof plastic folder holding laminated permit documents protected inside clear sleeves. My first thought was that whoever left them behind had made a careless mistake. Then I looked closer. My full legal name appeared across the top of the easement approval paperwork. According to those documents, I had voluntarily granted Lakeside Estates permanent utility access across my ranch. My signature appeared at the bottom of every page. Only one problem. I had never signed any of them. I stared at the signature for nearly a minute. It looked convincing from a distance, but the longer I studied it, the more obvious the forgery became. My real signature has a sharp upward stroke through the M. In Morrison, something I've written thousands of times over the years. Whoever copied it missed that detail completely. They forged my name well enough to fool someone processing paperwork in an office, but not the man who had signed loan documents, livestock registrations, tax records, and land deeds his entire adult life. I took photographs of every page before carefully placing them back exactly where I found them. Then I drove straight into the county offices. I wanted answers before I confronted anyone from Lakeside Estates. The clerk at the land records counter pulled the project file within minutes. Everything looked official. Engineering approvals, environmental reviews, construction permits, emergency sewer expansion authorization, utility corridor maps. Every required document appeared complete. Then she reached the easement paperwork and watched my expression change. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I slid my driver's license across the counter, pointed at the signature on the file, and quietly replied, "That's supposed to be me. It isn't." Her smile disappeared instantly. She compared the signature on my license to the one attached to the permit package 3 separate times before excusing herself to get a supervisor. Within minutes, the atmosphere inside that office changed completely. No one accused me of lying. No one suggested I had forgotten signing anything. Instead, they began making copies, opening additional records, and quietly asking who had submitted the easement package on behalf of Lakeside Estates. I left the courthouse with more questions than answers. Back at my ranch, I parked beside the fresh trench as the evening sun stretched long shadows across my pasture. Whoever had done this believed forged paperwork would be enough to take part of my land forever. But one thought kept repeating in my mind as I looked at that scar running through my property. If they were willing to fake my signature for this project, what else were they hiding? That question stayed with me all night. After 30 years of running cattle, I'd learned that when someone lies about one thing involving land, the truth is usually buried somewhere in the paperwork. The next morning, I pulled every property file I owned from the fireproof cabinet in my office. Old deeds passed down from my father, survey maps dating back decades, water rights certificates, utility plats, county correspondence, even drought management documents that hadn't been opened in years. I spread everything across the dining room table and started reading line by line. Around noon, I found the first piece that made me stop. It was a county drought contingency plan created years before Lakeside Estates had finished construction. Buried in the appendix was a paragraph identifying my 400-foot agricultural well as the designated emergency backup water source for the subdivision if municipal pressure ever dropped below minimum operating levels. I read it twice to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. They weren't just crossing my property. Their emergency water supply depended on rights connected to my ranch. That discovery sent me digging even deeper. I drove to the county GIS office and requested the underground utility maps for every parcel surrounding my land. The technician printed several oversized sheets, rolled them into a tube, and wished me luck. Back home, I unrolled them across the shop floor, weighting the corners with toolboxes. Within minutes, the entire picture came into focus. The sewer expansion they had installed didn't simply cross my ranch. The entire gravity sewer serving all 47 homes traveled beneath my south pasture before connecting to the county treatment plant nearly 3 miles west. Even more important, the only maintenance hatch servicing that line sat about 100 feet inside my fence line. Every inspection, every repair, every emergency response required physical access across my land. Without that access, the entire neighborhood had no legal way to maintain the system they had secretly buried beneath my ranch. I wasn't finished yet. I scheduled a meeting with a property rights attorney who specialized in agricultural easements. I laid every document on his conference table, including the forged signature and the utility maps. He spent almost 2 hours reviewing everything before leaning back in his chair. "Jack," he finally said, "if this easement was fraudulently obtained, then legally speaking, they have no enforceable right to occupy your land. You can't destroy their infrastructure, but you absolutely have the right to deny voluntary access to your private property and protect your own water system. Every maintenance request has to come through you. Then he smiled slightly. And if your backup water rights are private, you aren't obligated to provide them unless a valid agreement says otherwise. For the first time since discovering the trench, I realized I wasn't the one trapped by this situation. They were. The following morning, I walked out to the main control valve feeding my agricultural backup connection. I photographed the meter, documented the existing pressure, recorded everything on video, and slowly closed the valve. Nothing illegal, nothing destructive. I simply stopped providing access to water that belonged to me. By the end of the day, residents inside Lakeside Estates began reporting weak pressure in neighborhood chat groups. Day 2 was even simpler. I installed a heavy steel padlock on the maintenance hatch located inside my pasture. Then I mounted 2 high-definition security cameras overlooking the area and posted bright signs reading private property, no trespassing entry, without written permission prohibited. Again, perfectly legal. Anyone needing access could request it through proper channels. Nobody did. By day 3, the effect started showing. The fountains at the neighborhood entrance stopped flowing. Decorative waterfalls beside several homes fell silent. Swimming pools that relied on automatic refill systems slowly dropped below operating levels. Without continuous circulation, patches of green algae began appearing around the tile edges. Landscapers struggled to keep lawns alive under strict water limitations. Residents started asking questions the HOA board couldn't answer. On the afternoon of the 4th day, a white BMW rolled slowly through my ranch entrance without permission before stopping near my barn. A man wearing a spotless white vest climbed out, adjusting expensive sunglasses before walking toward me with the confidence of someone accustomed to giving orders. "Jack Morrison?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Chad Preston, president of the Lakeside Estates HOA. We need you to reopen the water connection immediately. You're interfering with critical neighborhood infrastructure." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and calmly replied, "Critical infrastructure that crossed my ranch using a forged signature?" His expression tightened for a moment before recovering. "I'm sure there has been some misunderstanding. Our contractors handled the paperwork." I walked in my office and returned carrying a single envelope. "Good," I said. "Then you can hand this to whoever handled it." Chad opened the envelope and unfolded the invoice inside. Across the top appeared the total amount due, $847,000. The breakdown listed $25, $200 in unpaid retroactive easement fees, $680,000 for unauthorized excavation and permanent utility occupation, and $163,000 covering damaged fencing, broken water lines, pasture restoration, livestock disruption, surveying expenses, and legal costs. He stared at the numbers before laughing loudly enough for the ranch hands nearby to hear. "You've got to be kidding," he said. "You'll never collect this." I shrugged. "Maybe, but until someone fixes the forged easement, nobody crosses my property." Chad folded the invoice, tossed it onto the hood of my pickup, climbed back into his BMW, and drove away without another word. The next week became a battle of letters instead of machinery. Attorneys representing the HOA demanded immediate access. I responded through my lawyer requesting proof of a valid easement. They threatened lawsuits. We requested the original notarized signatures. They claimed emergency necessity. We asked why an emergency project required forged authorization instead of contacting the property owner. Every exchange pushed them further into a corner. On the 10th day, their attorney requested a settlement meeting. He offered $12,000 to resolve everything immediately. My attorney slid a prepared proposal across the table instead. 25-year easement, $8,500 per month, 12 months prepaid, $180,000 due immediately. Every future maintenance visit subject to 48-hour written approval unless there was a verified public safety emergency. Complete restoration of all damaged ranch property at HOA expense. The attorney looked stunned. "That's outrageous," he said. "We'll pursue eminent domain if necessary." My lawyer didn't even raise his voice. Luxury residential sewer access is not public infrastructure eligible for eminent domain under these facts. Feel free to file. The meeting ended 15 minutes later with no agreement. By the third week, the consequences inside Lakeside Estates became impossible to ignore. Several sewer backups were reported after delayed maintenance inspections. A foul septic odor drifted across portions of the neighborhood during the hottest afternoons. County health inspectors visited repeatedly after receiving resident complaints. Violation notices appeared. Homeowners demanded emergency board meetings. 2 multi-million-dollar houses quietly appeared on the market within days of each other. Standing on my pasture one evening, watching the lights come on across the subdivision, I realized something had changed. They were no longer trying to intimidate me. They were trying to figure out how to survive. By the fourth week, Lakeside Estates was falling apart. The fountains were still dry, several pools had turned green, and frustrated homeowners were demanding answers from an HOA board that had completely lost control. County inspectors had issued multiple violation notices after repeated sewer complaints, and 2 luxury homes quietly appeared on the market. What had started as a shortcut through my ranch was quickly becoming the most expensive decision the board had ever made. Then, one Friday afternoon, Chad Preston returned. This time there was no white vest, no confident smile, and no threats. He stepped into my ranch office carrying a settlement agreement instead of legal warnings. "The board voted," he said quietly. "We're ready to settle." I read every page carefully. The HOA agreed to pay $180,000 immediately for the unauthorized construction, damaged fencing, broken water line, legal expenses, and restoration of my pasture. They also accepted a 25-year easement agreement requiring automatic monthly payments of $8,500. Every future maintenance visit would require my written approval, advance notice, and access only through designated routes across my property. Before signing, I looked at Chad one last time. "One condition," I said. "From now on, tell the truth. There was never a valid easement. Someone forged my signature because asking permission was harder." He lowered his head and simply replied, "Agreed." My attorney reviewed the paperwork. Chad signed first, then I signed beside him. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a banking notification. The full $180,000 wire transfer had arrived. The following morning, I unlocked the maintenance hatch inside my pasture and reopened the backup water valve. Within hours, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The fountains flowed again, pool pumps restarted, and maintenance crews finally had legal access to the sewer line. The difference was that nothing happened without my approval anymore. Every month since then, $8,500 has arrived automatically in my account. Every contractor requests permission before stepping onto my land. Every visit is documented, and every agreement is in writing. They never crossed my fence without asking again. Looking back, this was never really about the money. It was about protecting property rights. Too many people see open ranch land and assume it's empty, that nobody will notice another trench, another pipe, or another shortcut. But the value of land isn't measured by the size of the houses nearby. It's measured by the rights attached to it and by the owner willing to defend those rights. Lakeside Estates believed dirt was free. They believed forged paperwork was easier than an honest conversation. In the end, they learned the most valuable thing beneath my ranch wasn't the $1 million sewer system they buried. It was the permission they never had. If you enjoyed this story, let me know where you're watching from. And one more question before you go. If someone secretly buried a utility line under your property, what monthly easement fee would you charge? Drop your number in the comments. I read every single one.